Hello world, this is MJ and this is Film Philosophy. Today we're going to discuss the 1968 film Planet of the Apes. Now, before we get started, I would like to ask, did any of you see the movie Norbit? There's this one particular scene in the movie where the wife and his brother-in-laws stuck Norbit inside the basement. And once he was in there, he was like, I was watching this movie with my cousins, and believe it or not, I was the only one who caught that reference. Yeah. I hate my life. It's hard to imagine life without Planet of the Apes. Coming soon this year, they're going to release the third movie of the reboot, War of the Planet of the Apes. It also spinned off a lot of other mediums such as a comic book, a TV series, and a couple of video games. They solidify what is considered to be a franchise, but when you think about movies and franchises, the first thing that pops into your mind is the Star Wars titles or the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But this movie came out before all that, almost a decade before Star Wars became synonymous to the term blockbuster. So, let's begin. Planet of the Apes was based upon a novel that was written by Pierre Boulle, originally titled La Planète des Singes. Although the book has a lot of differences in terms of narrative and story, the major theme still remains the same. It was press agent turned producer Arthur P. Jacobs that pitched the ideas to numerous studios and was picked up by 20th Century Fox. The screenplay adaptation was written by Rod Serling and Michael Wilson. Serling is most well known for his work in The Twilight Zone and the movie adaptation. Other films include The Requiem of a Heavyweight and 7 Days in May. Wilson, on the other hand, best contributions are Bridges of the River Kwai, The Sandpiper, and The Man in Her Life. It is interesting to note that Wilson and Serling are attached to these films because researching them was a blast. Wilson was blacklisted from Hollywood due to allegations of being a communist. He left the US and continued his work in Paris. There are numerous films that he co-wrote, to which he wasn't credited to originally. I mentioned before that he wrote The Bridges of the River Kwai. Some are The Court Martial of Billy Mitchell, Lawrence of Arabia. The blacklisting really hindered Wilson's chances of getting more awards, while Serling, on the other hand, he won 7 Emmys, a Golden Globe, and a Peabody Award. Wow. Regardless of these though, Serling didn't let those awards get to his head. He often saw them as not a big deal. I just find it funny that you say it's not a big deal after 7 Emmys, you know. I would just like to say that we have barely begun talking about the movie and we are already talking about people and the political climate and how it changed their lives. So, now, the cast. What can I say about the cast? It's amazing. The leading role went to Charlton Heston. Well-known works are The Ten Commandments, where he received his first Golden Globe nomination, and an Academy Award for Ben-Hur. Kim Hunter was well known for her portrayal of Stella from A Streetcar Named Desire. Roddy McDowall has been in the industry for years, and some of his best works are The Greatest Story Ever Told, Inside Daisy Clover, and my favorite, The Poseidon Adventure. Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed, but I just mentioned 3 Christian-related movies from 2 actors. It was a fad back then. I just find it funny because the main movie that we're talking about right now is about apes, evolution, and humanity. So, and let us not forget Morris Evans, who is a well-known Shakespearean actor. He did a stage play version of Dial M for Murder. Here's the kicker. He recorded and LP stories from Winnie the Pooh. So if you ever wanted to connect old Pooh Bear from Planet of the Apes, there you go. Dr. Zaius. The film was directed by Franklin Schaffner, to which was recommended by Heston due to their previous work, The Warlord. The music was composed and arranged by Jerry Goldsmith. He has a lot of well-known works in both television and movies. The man is an institution. So, don't be surprised if he comes up in the future videos. Judging by the 2 screenwriters that we just discussed, it shows that the script is as heavy as the visuals. There's a reason why their script is the one that got approved. I chose this film because I wanted the viewers to see beyond the visuals and the prosthetics. While yes, we have come a long way in terms of CGI and motion capture, some may even say that this movie is archaic, but that is the whole point. You can't judge it due to its age. We can only really count upon the story, and to me, that is the one that's most important. I'm putting emphasis on Sterling and Wilson because we can only count on the story and the script. Granted, the original idea came from Pierre Boulle, but Sterling and Wilson made it a cult classic. At this point, the prosthetics and the sets are only a visual aid to tell a much more bigger story. In an editing standpoint, there are a lot of fast cuts that matches the pace of the movie, especially during action scenes. But there are times when it is slowing down, and when that happens, you pay attention. Now, it's easy to place ourselves on Taylor's shoes because he is our representative, the only human there. Well, speaking human. But I would also like to discuss the other characters that makes up this incredible story. Cornelius and Zira, and of course, Dr. Zaius. Let's start with Taylor, our representative. A highly cynical and intuitive individual, he can read people's fears and their motivations. He did this when he dissected his fellow shipmates. Everything to him is transparent, and he can come up with a decent conclusion with his gut feeling alone. He's a loner, hates humanity, and mainly points out their flaws. But he doesn't sincerely see those flaws within himself, nor does he strive to become better. He is well assured of what he is and what he can do, but the minute that it's challenged verbally, we often see him silent, even after he got his voice and freedom back. Taylor, with all respects, is a strong individual. If you place a lesser being in his shoes, they would have just probably given up or just stayed silent. Although he's not the ideal hero when you really think about it. Because of his smug approach and cynical mind, he's not the type of person that you like right away. The only time that we connect to Taylor is when he was being mistreated, and if you've ever been on the receiving end of sympathy, you would either be glad for it or hate it. Do you think Taylor is the type of person who would like our sympathy? I don't think so. Taylor as a character went through a series of emotions in this film. During the first encounter to the apes, it turns into fear and surprise, and then frustration when trying to communicate to Zira and Cornelius. Isolation and anger when he saw Landon with his mind tampered with. While fear and self-preservation is a driving force, Taylor mainly has a default emotion, which is anger. Although at the beginning he didn't know where to direct this anger towards to, in the end we all know it's Dr. Zaius. Yes, he still debates, which shows reasoning, but the emotion is still there. I chose anger because we never actually see him cry. We saw him frustrated, but usually it's through channeling that emotion. I mentioned that he's a loner and yet he finds attachment to Nova. He did mention before that he left Earth because nobody was really there for him. I just found it interesting that he found love to a person that we consider as uncivilized and to the ape society, a wild animal. You know that saying that you never truly appreciate something until it's gone? Taylor is isolated in this planet, and it's not hard for Taylor to appreciate Nova's presence in his situations. Plus, it doesn't hurt that your cage partner looks like a supermodel, so yeah. Like all of us, Taylor is flawed, but circumstances led him to become our representative for this story, for better or for worse. Now let's talk about Dr. Zaius, the Defender. A dark horse of the story, we don't actually really know much about Dr. Zaius. We have no idea if he has a family, a hobby, or what he is like outside of his work. He is the Minister of Science and the Chief Defender of Faith. He is highly determined to preserve their way of living and would go above and beyond for this. We need to empathize with Dr. Zaius in some way, not because of his fear for man, but for what he is trying to preserve. If Taylor represents truth and science, Dr. Zaius represents tradition and security. Zaius' position is a difficult one, but don't you find it funny that he is given two titles? Science and faith are often butting heads with each other, so why give it to a single guy? The two titles are contradicting. Even today, there's an ongoing feud about creationism and evolution, a highly controversial topic for the right reasons. But if you are already on an established society and you wish to preserve said society, you would give it to the one man that can make the absolute decision that is biased to your cultural beliefs. It is not Zaius' intention to keep his people from progressing, but to protect them from truths that might destroy their culture. Now let's talk about our chimp friends, Cornelius and Zira, the Divided. Cornelius is a fascinating character study because he mainly goes through a lot of things in this movie. While he might be brilliant, he is careful not to overstep his bounds. He is onto something with his theories, but he also knows the risk in providing these informations freely. Zira is an interesting character as well. Zira believes that men can be equal to apes and they can actually learn something from them. Zira cares for humans, and she shows this when she reaches out to grab Taylor's hands in one of the scenes. The Sacred Scrolls always warns apes about humans, but Zira, by choice, choose not to heed those warnings. Remember when I said the difference between Taylor and Zaius, truth and science versus tradition and security? Cornelius and Zira are conflicted between these two embodiments of these ideas. I label the two as the divided because they are in this place where their theories and the sacred scrolls are in conflict. The conflict within Cornelius about his theory that might challenge the sacred scrolls is not an easy thing. In any form of faith, the biggest fear is being shamed. Being labeled as someone going against their faith is a very terrifying thought. He swallows his pride as a scientist, so he would not be marked as a heretic. Cornelius and Zira are both brave, kind, and intelligent, but even proposing the idea to their people will leave them as outcasts. The ultimate question that I would like to ask, who is better, man or ape? Now, before we get ahead of ourselves and saying that we are better than apes, let's entertain the idea that this place actually exists and man has been dethroned as the dominant species of the planet. So which one is really better, us or them? In order for us to dissect this question properly, we have to look at ape culture and government and see how they treat each other as a society. According to their sacred scrolls, all apes are created equal. But then again, we recently found out that the quota system's been recently abolished, and there's still stigma between their different races, the chimps, gorillas, and the orangutans. Taylor's statement during his trial of some ape, it seems, are more equal than others is true in this case. In the scene where we were introduced to Zira for the first time, this is a piece of dialogue between her and Galen. You promised to talk to Dr. Zaius. I did, but you know how he looks down his nose to chimpanzees. Let's say it may take some time before we actually see some diversity in their culture since they're just getting started, but let's go back to Dr. Zaius. He is not afraid to use his power or position to benefit his cause, regardless of the fact of him being an overprotective leader. Having two titles and using it against the two people who are working under you is not cool. He is already the Minister of Science. He didn't need to label them as a heretic. They could have just removed the two scientists out of their positions. But he did so anyway, creating a false hearing to expose our poor chimpanzees. During Taylor's hearing, when Cornelius and Zira are making their case, we see the three aristocrats gesturing the three wise monkeys. Depending on what you use as reference, it can mean a lot of things, but in this film's context, it means that the wise will not see, hear, or speak to our poor chimpanzees. Everything at that point is already heresy, and they would not give leeway to reason or even entertain the idea. Discussions about control of information in their society almost makes me think that they live in a totalitarian government. Dr. Zaius said that he has always known about men and what they're capable of. It makes me think that there is some information being hidden away from the rest of the apes. Like, aside from the sacred scrolls, there is another set of scrolls being hidden away from the people. And this is not going to be the first time that you hear a government withholding information to their people. Is this the type of control that we want in order to preserve peace and security? Does that make them better than us? And is this what is needed for the future? Julius asked at the end of the film, why must knowledge stand still? What about the future? While Zaius did answer his question, I'd ask you this. Are there some truths that we or the apes are not ready for or not willing to accept? It doesn't have to be restricted to the confines of this movie. It could be something that is based on reality. Let's say global warming. Some consider it as a myth, some consider it as a fact. But regardless, it affects us all. In the end of the movie, Cornelius and Zira was asked by Taylor to join him. Cornelius refused, saying that he has proved his case, and words of, besides, his culture is my culture, showing his loyalty to his culture and race. But we all know what happened in the film. The caves were sealed and all of the evidence were buried. Once again, control. In the film, ideas like Cornelius and Zira affect all other apes. It would just be a matter of time before more theories about man rises up. Back in the real world, in that point about global warming, we shouldn't let time determine who is right or wrong. Otherwise, it might lead us to a much more dire point. Now let's talk about humanity. Now, I'm pretty sure a lot of you viewers felt Taylor's frustration when he was unable to speak. But what can he actually say that would benefit his cause? He did fall from the sky to a seemingly different world, but it would be understandable for it to be taken as a joke. They discussed this during the trial, and they came up with the same conclusion, but it wasn't where he came from or what his intentions are. It's what he represents. Throughout the movie, Taylor and us have been called a menace, a walking pestilence. But is this true though? All of us as humans have made many grave mistakes, and if history can teach us one thing, it's not to repeat those mistakes. Progress is slow, and not all ideas from different cultures are easily accepted. But we are diverse enough to say that we are not all the same. Not all human beings are unreasonable, greedy, or selfish. Taylor, on the other hand, our representative, didn't actually speak for us. If you look back to the story, he never actually defended our species. Did he not bother convincing the apes of their one-sided view of man because he knows it would be a waste of time? Or did he not bother because he knows all of these statements are true? In some ways, we are a lot like Taylor when you really think about it. In the bare bones of human nature, we only reason if we are at a disadvantage, and we become smug and ignorant when we are ahead. Are you one of the few that think that they can represent humanity better? If you really think about it, it would be a really difficult one. Being in a society, we often conform to the views and ideas of the masses. What more if this belief has been passed on from one generation to the other? How could you, our representative, make them see different? How could you remove that stigma from the people that's been passed on from generation after generation? How could you tell your enemy to trust you? Only a truly open-minded individual would even entertain the idea. We've come far when it comes to equality and peace, but we still fall flat on our face. There's still discrimination and there is still war. I understand it is much more complicated than that, and I agree. But it all counts for nothing if we keep committing the same mistakes. Remember the 23rd scroll, 9th verse says, "Beware the beast man, for he is the devil's spawn. Alone among God's primates, he kills for sport or lust or greed. Yes, he will murder his brother to possess his brother's land. Let him not breed in great numbers, for he will make a desert of his home in yours. Shun him, drive him back into his jungle lair, for he is the harbinger of death." In this scene, we see Taylor silent and has no rebuttal, because his cynical mind knows this to be true. I'll take you back to the beginning of the movie. It came from our hero's mouth himself. I wonder if man, that marvel of the universe, that glorious paradox that has sent me to the unknown, still makes war against his brother and lets his neighbor's children starve. All throughout the movie, we were made to defend ourselves. Taylor himself knew the failings of man and what we lacked as a species. Taylor became smug in the end when he regained his freedom, argued that he, man, is better than Zaius. He failed to see the flaws, even if it was just for a time, in all of us, and more importantly, within himself. This concludes our first video for this week. I hope you guys liked it. And if you think I forgot anything, please comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and next week we will be talking about the 1976 film Logan's Run. Watch it, and I'll see you next week. Peace.